Episode 144 Above Ground Podcast with Josh Rivedal.
Disclaimer. The hosts of this podcast, Timothy Patrick and Will Foley, are by no means medical professionals. However, having lived experience with mental illness themselves, they have gained useful perspectives on common mental health issues that some of us struggle to overcome on a daily basis. By sharing their stories, they hope to create connection. By creating connection, they hope to help you find your purpose. And through purpose, we can all begin to build the foundation for positive mental health. This is Above Ground Podcast.
Are you ready to lace up your boots, throw up your horns, and jump into the pit? Then let's stomp the stigmas of mental illness. It's time for Above Ground Podcast. Now, Will Foley and Timothy Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Above Ground Podcast. Above Ground Podcast.
Because you can't serve below.
This morning, we are joined by Josh Rivedal, and Josh is his pedigree is amazing, man. Josh is a storyteller, an author, a playwright. He is the founder and creator of Changing Minds, which is a mental health curriculum that spans K through 12. And he is also the creator of the I'm Possible project. He's a playwright. He does it all, man. Josh, thank you so much for joining us this morning, man. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm doing really well. I'm one eye is more sleepy than the other, but I'm cool. I'm good. I'm in good shape. I'm keeping that eye open. Glad to be here, fellas. Will, Tim, man, this is cool.
I'm really interested in getting to your story and why you've created these programs and stuff. I'm really interested in hearing about the who's, the what's, the when's, the where's, the why's.
Yeah. I guess all in all, I'm sort of a creative guy. I grew up, it's not my life anymore, but I grew up in a church, and my only, I loved singing. I loved acting. I saw my parents singing. I was always really interested. I couldn't never figure out why all the other little boys weren't excited about that stuff. And, and even some of the little, I was like, what? This is dope. This is amazing. And it was like, no, we don't want to do this. I'm like, anyway. So I always loved that, right? I always loved that kind of stuff. And then it became my escape. It became my gang. It became my way to escape. And as an adult, I've been in environments where I've seen where people haven't found that either escape or that camaraderie or whatever. And I'm like, that could, and they're in trouble. They're not doing one. I'm like, that could easily be me, without a doubt, because I was fortunate to have found some sense of purpose as a young person. But so I grew up in a relatively healthy but also abusive environment. My dad was the abusive parent, and emotionally and physically alternating. Most of it was emotional, and that I didn't have the words for that, but that was really devastating, and it was hurtful. It was hard. And it's had a profound effect on my mental well-being and mental health and hygiene, and probably has even contributed to or helped develop two mental illnesses, depression and anxiety, in my life. But that being said, I'm fortunate to have done the work as an adult, but I didn't do that work as a kid because I didn't have those words, right? So a reason to escape, right? And so fast forward. High school, college, I'm getting into playwriting and professional acting, and really excited about that, and start working and doing, even voiceover and a lot of theater, and still trying to find my way in the world. Moved to New York City, commercials, and also like kind of waiting tables on the side. And really extricating myself from the family, not really realizing that I didn't have to separate myself from everyone, just from the one person. And so I kind of left them all behind. And age 25, my parents break up. My dad dies by suicide, and he's not the first in the family. His dad died in the 1960s by suicide, and it was never something we talked about in the home. In fact, when I was about 12 and my sister was 13 and my brother's about 5 years younger, so he was pretty little at that time. But my mom pulled us aside and told the two of us in secret, because he didn't want us to know. Our dad didn't want us to know. He was ashamed. He was embarrassed. There's tons of stigma, right? And so that, and then learning that day, and sort of being explained, like, this might be why your dad's angry and abusive, but more so, don't tell anyone, keep it a secret. Well, that led me to start keeping secrets health secrets, mental health secrets, vulnerable secrets that would have meant nothing in the very beginning, but when you keep them a secret for a while, they own you, right? So that's been a life of unlearning. But anyway, so when I lost my dad, I didn't like him, but I loved him, and so I felt all these different feelings. I was sad, relieved, angry, hurt, joyful, and some of that didn't feel okay, and I didn't know I was allowed to feel all that stuff. And so then guilt came in, and for the next couple of years, like it's almost 2 years, like professional life started to take off again. Personal life was taking a nosedive, because I think you probably know, and you're living the life, you're walking the talk. As I was listening to your episodes earlier, when trauma like that happens, lots of other residual things show up as well. It's like this comet, right? And there's these tailwinds, right? And those tailwinds are things to prepare for and to be affected by, but I still didn't have the words. I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have, what I'm connecting to now. And so, my personal life just took this nosedive. Mom, and I weren't doing well. I felt betrayed and lied to and lost. So I extricated myself from that relationship. Girlfriend of 6 years left me as well. I wasn't a healthy partner. And so almost 2 years after I lost my dad, beginning of 2011, I was 6 weeks shy of 27, darkest period of my life. I didn't know that a lot of major change all at one time can be a catalyst for suicidal ideation. And it certainly was for me, on top of 2 undiagnosed yet treatable mental illnesses. Treatable, yes, didn't know that at the time. So what happens when things aren't treated? Your kidney disease, your heart disease, your depression, it'll wreak havoc, and it can become fatal in worst cases, right? I started thinking nobody loved me or cared about me, and the world would be better off if I weren't in it. Now, that's not, my brain was sick, right? You can have a sick kidney, you can have a sick pancreas. I had a sick brain at that time. And so I was having a psych ache, right? Back aches, knee aches. I was having a psych ache, manageable, treatable. And I had this epiphany, though, that I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to feel the emotional pain that I was feeling. And so that didn't make life any easier in the moment. But it was like, oh my God, like I'm not messed up or crazy or sinful or bad or weird or a wimp or anything like that. I'm a person. And so I still was reticent about getting help. And I ended up reaching out. Like, it took me a little bit to figure out who or where or what I was going to do. And in the meantime, I was in tremendous physical and emotional pain, because the two can affect each other in a big way. So I reached out to my mom, the last person in the world that I wanted to speak to. And I actually think I figured out why I did that some years later. I was reading this book about Iwo Jima, and the author was talking about, it's a big battle in World War II, and he was talking about how when young men, because that was all who could fight at that time, women couldn't, other genders couldn't. It was when they knew they were dying, they would call out for their mothers, like almost always. And that's where I was, in a different context, of course, but I felt like I was at the end, right? And so I was like, I'm going to go back to the beginning. I didn't have the words for that at the time. I kind of figured that out later. So she became my mom again, helped me, which was great. And then that provided a spark to like, hey, where am I going? What am I doing? I can do differently. And I was still in a lot of pain, but I was like, maybe if she believes in me and I kind of believe in me, maybe I can find these other resources and things and help. And so I, was de-isolating and reaching out and curating my world, in a sense, like the people who I was reaching out to and listening to and being present with and hanging with, right? So if I wanted to be a better son or friend or researcher, I'd find those people in my world and be like, okay, I need to take that on, because you are the company that you keep. Creativity, spirituality, counseling, therapy was a good move for me because I was back in school, so I got it for free. And then I realized to feel whole again, I needed to be in the service of other people, and that was a process. And so recovery felt like it was about 9 months to me to not just be me again, but to be 2.0, so I wouldn't get back to that place, and so I could learn how to walk and be different in the world. And so I was like, well, how am I going to show up if I'm going to be of service? What am I going to do? Am I going to be a crossing guard or a lunch lady? Like, what am I going to do? And am I going to have to retire from show business? And so after a 4-week retirement, I came back and I was like, man, I'm going to put the creative work and the mental health suicide prevention work together. And so in between losing my dad and doing this work, So it was about 22 months. I had written and performed a one-man play. And it was 16 characters, and I sang it in it. It's about an hour long, beginning, middle, and an end. I did it in New York. It got a good reviews, good run. People were excited about it. I was too. And part of it, so it's partly my life. Most of it's a comedy. It's a coming of age, and the end talks about my dad's suicide. Like this 5-7 minutes, people are really connecting with me on it, like survivors of loss. And so I was like, wait a minute, I have this tool that I could flip it on its head, get trained, and pair it with suicide prevention and mental health concepts and education. And so I did. I had this idea. I was like, where do I go? What do I do? So I reached out to all these different colleges and was trying to pitch it. And like, I think this could work. And nobody knew what the hell they were doing, what I was doing. And I kind of didn't either. And I finally figured it out. And the college I was at was the one that picked it up. And the psych department and a psychology student group sponsored it. And I had it filmed, and I had some mentorship on it, and some oversight, and we did it. I did it. It was a three-part piece, like the play, the education, the Q&A, and I didn't know how it was going to go, and everybody left, and one kid waited around to the very end and was like, hey, thanks for doing this. I've been depressed as long as I can remember and suicidal for a couple of months. I thought these were like normal, and they're not. Now I know. And so I'm going to go get help at the counseling center. And I was like, oh my gosh, like in my head, I was like, if I could help this one guy, all this stuff that I went through was, I mean, I don't want to do it again, but it was worth it to help this one guy. And so I kind of got addicted from there. So I started pitching that program, and that fall, 2011, 4 presentations in 3 or 4 states. The next semester, 17. And since then, I've done almost 420 presentations in 4 countries, 41 states, 4 Canadian provinces, 2 states in the Capital Territory in Australia, east of England. And then I've developed other programming. So I'm also a stand-up comic. And so I'll do stand-up with it now, where it's about me. It's safe, it's inclusive, but it's stand-up, and then I've, this curriculum, I'm a co-author on some peer-reviewed journal papers on trauma, on chronic illness, on suicide loss. I'm moving in the direction of pairing mental health and food together. So I'm in sort of a longer term process of putting a mental health themed cookbook together. I have an idea around that I'm going to start cultivating lavender, because it's a cash crop, and it's a way that I think I can feed the community twice, like infusing it with food, pairing it with mentally healthy foods and things like that. So it's a very new thing. This part is new. Doing some workplace stuff now. Doing stuff with dentists now, a lot of dentists, which is not like, it's just continuity of care. It's more about them being a resource. And there's other stuff going on too, but I'm having these kinds of conversations, and that's fun and exciting. I've got one other thing that I'm excited about, and then we'll get to you guys, because it's been all me. But
it's about, man, that's what it's about.
I've got another book in development, but it's a middle grade fantasy novel, and it's got mental health themed concepts and social justice concepts sort of underlying. And all the spells are in Spanish, and the main character lives with panic attack and anxiety disorder, and just sort of some healthy concepts around that. So it's very mainstream with these, so I just see it as another avenue to have a healthier, different, better conversation around this stuff. So that's me, man.
Dude, that's what it's all about. Wow. So much. Wow. There was so much wrapped up in there, man.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for opening up, being vulnerable, and thank you for the work that you do, man. You do a lot of stuff, and boy, it's great to hear, man. It's super great to hear.
Thanks, brother. It's good to connect with you guys too, man. We're like spokes in this wheel, and we keep it going around by feeding each other too, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you just from hearing some of that stuff, both I know Will and I, we definitely relate to a lot of that, what you said. So
you've come from an emotional, physical, traumatic life to having a purpose at a young age, which that creative drive gave you that purpose. And I related so much to everything. I want to know from you, did the creative part ever suffer because of your mental illnesses? Did you lose faith in yourself at any time? Obviously you went through a really hard time where you were thinking about dying by suicide yourself. So you obviously had lost faith in yourself somewhere along the lines. Did it take your confidence? Did it take your ability to see any way out?
That's a great question. Wow. That's one I haven't been asked. I think indirectly it's affected the art and the creativity for sure, because there have been bigger stretches where when like the way that my depression and anxiety will show up sometimes is that they make a difficult life situation a lot worse. They can, if I don't keep them in check, they can make it a little bit worse. And if I don't play with them and talk to them and wrestle with them and love them, then it definitely will make it a lot worse. And there are times when I've known it and times when I haven't. So for sure, like there's been a couple of bigger couple year stretches in my life where I've been creative, but not to the level where I'm like really able to do it to, as often, as frequently, and as much as I want. And that provides me joy and healing and hope and just as an outlet. I went through a divorce and a couple of years ago, and that period of time, it was almost the whole relationship was kind of painful. And there's a lot that goes into that. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the person that I was married to. It's a lot of the extenuating circumstances. So, I wasn't wrestling as much as I should have with the illnesses and with, at the time. And it was just a lot of trauma. And so, yeah, man, my creativity certainly suffered. And, but yet that life vest, that life preserver is always there. It's always within reach, right? For me. So, as soon as I started getting out of that, just as one example, like that time period, I noticed myself grasping onto it, and I was like, all right, 10 minutes a day of writing, 5 minutes a day. And even if I sit there and look at the screen, at least I'm being consistent with something that I love and enjoy. So yeah, it certainly does. It can affect it. But I think part of that is engaging in the creative muscle memory rather than I have to be great. Just make it muscle memory.
Well, and it's interesting how you talk about the dance with the demons, man, because I speak very similar to you in that regard, because I've made friends with a lot of my demons, and listening to you and Tim and I have had a lot of conversations about therapy, and I believe everybody should be in therapy at least once in their lives, because everybody has some shit to work through. It doesn't matter what it is. So it's interesting how you came to figure out that you didn't have the language as a youth to speak about your emotions. And I kind of wanted to touch on that. Was that part of the reason for forming the curriculum of your program? Was it to give other people language? Did you figure that out through all your emotional intelligence training, that you didn't have the language and that kind of proceeded to give you the language?
It was some of that, right? So there's like business, and then there's like art, and then there's like wanting to do good in the world. And so, yeah, part of it was because I realized that young people, well, first of all, like I was getting a lot of requests, and like I can't be everywhere. And so I was like, all right, I'll create something that, where I can teach other people how to teach it. Right. So that was like one thing. And then I also realized like, we're just not getting to kids young enough. Right. And case in point, like, so we, kids have different language, but they're really smart and they get it. Right. And we often like will lie to kids, usually from a good place, but it's not healthy to do that. And so people sometimes ask me, and just giving an example, like, how do you talk to the little people in your world about emotion, or about even the things that you've been through, right? Because I went through stuff and they lied to me about it. My grandpa, these other things, right? So, all right, so cool. So the way I talk to my 5-year-old niece, if she has asked me about her grandfather, my dad, I'm like, Grandpa's brain was sick and that's why he died, and he didn't know how to ask for help. And so when you get angry, or when you throw a tantrum or something, just say, I need help, Uncle Josh. And then we'll figure it out together, and so that's language that she can understand, and I'm not lying to her. Right. So, yeah. So we need to find different ways, healthier ways to talk to our little people, and to also empower them to find language for themselves. Yeah, totally. So, you know, and the brain, right, isn't done developing until 25, 26, 27, somewhere around that time. So, but we can prepare these kids for that time, and we can also prepare them by teaching them how to love, self-care, self-compassion, which isn't something that I learned how to cultivate for myself at that little age either. So, yeah.
How
Yeah,
did you start the changing minds? How did you like get it into full effect? You know, did you have these booklets or whatever, and kind of get them out to schools, or did you go there and kind of sell it, per se?
Yeah. So, I, you know, it's an ongoing thing, but it's a matter of like, you know, a couple of things, right? So I had to test it first. So I tested it in a bunch of different environments because I've gotten to know a fair amount of people at this point in the educational environment through mental health over the years. So I was like, all right, hey, I know we've worked together before, or hey, we're buddies on some level. Can I test this out at your school, or can you teach this on my behalf? And this is how you do and what you do. And then from there, it's like, you know, if I've worked with them or worked and they are like, hey, I wish we had something more, that's an easy add-on, upsell, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so it's really kind of an extension of my speaking work. I haven't gotten to the place where I'm like, you know, doing inbound traffic and marketing funnels and stuff like that, kind of because I hate it, and also because I don't have the time, but I would, and I probably should. But yeah, so it's just kind of been a little more organic at the moment.
I see that you're assist trained and everything, and a lot of people don't know what assist is. Can you explain what assist is?
Yeah, I love assist. So it's applied suicide intervention skills and training. So ASIST. Leave off the last S for savings. But so dumb. So
Yeah.
remember those mattress commercials?
Yeah,
So
right. Well, you're spoken like a true stand-up comedian trying to get the joke out of it, man.
So it's done by Living Works, which is an organization out of Canada, and so they have the Canadian version, the US version. They might even have an Australian version, but basically it's a 2-day, 8 hour day training, and it's all about suicide intervention, you know, helping someone, being I guess a pseudo kind of a gatekeeper, right? So you're the safe person. You know, it's all about intervention rather than prevention, right? So intervention's like you're at the point where somebody's in that place, you suspect they're in that place. Prevention is a lot of things. Prevention is food insecurity, homelessness, you know, helping prevent food insecurity, homelessness, because this is a whole layered thing, right? And we often focus on the individual, like it's their issue or they're struggling. I'm like, yes, that's all true, but there are things that we can do systemically that can prevent the severity of people diving into severe hopelessness. So anyway, two 8 hour days. Love the training. I'm a big fan. It's hard to get people for 2 8 hour days. So there's other stuff out there. And actually, so the suicide prevention module of what I do is sort of a direct response to that idea that people don't have 8 hours a day for 2 days, but they have an hour and a half or two in a single day, and they can sit through that, and you get the drive-by education. You're not going to get all the stats and the figures, but you'll get the basics, which is what we need. We need the basic CPR.
Go back to sweeping things under the rug. Because it's interesting that you use the language about being lied to, because it's funny and it's not funny. It's kind of ironic because we're in the holiday season and we have all these traditions that we upkeep for kids, and we try, you know what I mean, to try to give them hope. And I think that there's good things in there. I want to know how you feel now as a grown up. And I'll use that term loosely because I'm almost 50 and I'm not grown up, man. And I've realized that I had a lot to learn to be a man, and I'm just learning that now, man, very late in life. And how do you view not being able to talk about your stuff now as you did when you found out about a lot of things? And like, what did that do to your world? Like, did it shatter it? Did it, I know, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think on on a cerebral level, I don't think at the time when things were revealed that my world was shattered, but I think my body felt it and it lived in my body. I think in my brain, I didn't know what to do with that information because everything was happening so fast. And I didn't have the cognitive skills, I think, to process all that. What I can say now, and the work that I've done now is more like, hey, little Josh, because I was little at the time, and there's that little boy still lives inside me, and you got to take care of that little guy and protect him too, even now. But you were doing the best you could, and the little kid inside, the people that were lying to you, and they were trying to protect themselves and you too. That just happens to be part of their journey and part of yours, and how the two of you or the three of you or whatever intersected. And so to me, I think I can be compassionate to all the players in it and use it as motivation to do healthier for the next generations, and at least the ones that I can directly and indirectly affect. So I mean, yeah, for sure. Like it didn't feel good. It was like, wait a minute, what? And I think in the lead up, because I knew I was being lied to about my grandfather, even like younger than 12. I was like, yeah, right. Like, and at one point it even did the math. And I know this is one example, but like in terms of that thing being lied to, but I just remember like he died in 1966. And I was told that he died of shrapnel. It's like, that is the longest battle of shrapnel that I have ever heard of in my life. Also, what's shrapnel? Yeah. So there, but I think the body don't lie, man. The body don't lie. You feel it in your body. Yeah.
Yeah, I've discovered this in the last few years. Like Tim and I have turned each other on to so many books and different things, and to find out that trauma lives in the body, and to really, like, when you read The Body Keeps the Score, which is one of the best books ever written about trauma in the body. It's crazy how different things manifest, and physical symptoms and are really just emotional problems. And although it's hard now because I look at everything like that now.
I got a question actually with kind of related to your father. One, how old was he when he died by suicide?
He was 60. He had just turned 60. Yeah.
And did you guys, because I know you earlier on in the conversation, you had said it was a little, your childhood was a little rocky, we'll say. So did you reconcile with him, or did that affect his passing at all with you? Like, did it affect you, personally more so?
Yes and no. I think I was mourning what could have been. I don't know that we exactly reconciled because I wasn't ready at the time. I wasn't ready. I didn't understand that forgiveness is for you and not for the other person. That's my view on it, at least. So I was still carrying around some heavy stuff when he passed away around him. And so we hadn't really reconciled. I mean, he kind of had said a little bit like, I love you a couple of times, once or twice, like towards the end, and he expressed some appreciation. But to me, it also was like, you want to be my friend now that you have nothing left? Like, I don't think I'm here for that. And it made me mad. I was like, so I'm your last resort now, but you treated me like shit and made fun of me and beat me as a kid. Like, we don't get to make that. You don't get to just flip that, dude. So I was really upset about that. And I had heard that he had given one of my siblings an apology. And that didn't bother me. I was happy that they got it, but I was like, well, I never got that, so I guess whatever. But that has nothing to do with me. So I think, it's kind of wild. So I'm not really a huge believer in like metaphysical. I mean, I kind of am, but I'm trying to keep my distance and play it cool. But I went to see a medium recently, which isn't like a fortune teller or anything. It's like somebody who like deals with energy or whatever. Because I had met somebody who had a couple of people in my life over the past few years that have had good experiences eye-opening experience. It's like, all right, well, I'm in Wisconsin. It's half price than when I was in LA. So I got the cash. Let's see what happens. And my dad was one of the people who visited, air quotes, I guess. I don't know if he did or not, but there was some apology and there was some explanation and there were some interesting things and just a conciliatory person, being, spirit, whatever. And there was an apology and I didn't need it. I felt like I'd already gotten it, through this work and what I'm doing. But that guy, I think is around as long as even if not in the spirit world, as long as we talk about him, so I still kind of have that relationship with him. It's just a different one. And it's a lot easier now. He's less chatty, he's he's still a weirdo, but
I get it. I just, I know that because that obviously happened, like 2 years or so prior to your little downfall, we'll call it. So I just assumed that maybe that had something to do with it.
I mean, it probably did on some level. It wasn't for me. I was just hopeless because that happened. My mom died, or not died, but my mom and I were going through it. And then my girlfriend, who I'd lived with. And I think a lot of what I had been experiencing for my entire life, I was sort of projecting onto that one relationship. Also because I hadn't cultivated self-confidence, self-concept, self-worth either. And that in part was a direct and indirect result of the experience I had with my dad. So I think indirectly you're probably right. Like it did have some effects, on my psyche and where I was in 2011 in crisis.
Do you think that, because you just talked about like self-confidence, self-worth, that whole self-love deficit area, like Will said, you have your hands in a lot of different areas. You've been on Broadway, books. Does any of that stuff help help you find that worth? Or is it something that you feel it's a different area? It's something that you have to inside, feel and believe.
I'm tearing up a little bit as I'm listening to you speak about that, because that's some work that I'm ongoing. And what I've had to do, yes.
As are we, Josh, as are we. That's why I'm asking, man.
Yeah. So that to me is inside or outside in work rather than inside out work. And to me, what I'm learning and have continued to learn is that the inside out work, you need both, but the inside out work is a little more sustainable than the outside in. And so,
well said.
That being a producer, producing all that stuff, it helped, but it's not a forever help. It's a temporary thing. And so but it has given me the space, because being a speaker and like everything that's led me to this work, like I'm in a pretty decent financial space. And so now I have time to think and time to do the inside out work, and time to think about, hey, your value is not because you're a producer. It's not the books. It's that you showed up for these people. It's that you loved on your niece and nephew this morning. It's that you are doing this volunteer work. It's that we're having these conversations. It's that you just are. It just is, right? It's not because of the other stuff, right? So that's constant, ongoing. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You don't have to do hours 40 through 50 through 60 this week on work. You're still valuable, even if you don't produce as much this week. So that's an ongoing thing for sure.
I can say this from personal experience. What keeps me here is the legacy that I would leave behind should I die by suicide, because my mother's attempted twice. Now, you lost your dad and your granddad, and you've also had your own struggles and nearly ended your own life. And I'm curious to know now, in this chair that you're sitting in, looking at us, what your view is on suicide versus what it was when you were a kid.
Yeah, I think versus when I was a kid, it's not about anything but the need to cultivate hope, right? So it's about the box that we live in, and it's how to cultivate hope. So I didn't understand it as a kid, and it ties into this idea that in our society, when we talk about suicide, and it's almost always erroneously, but it's you're either a joke or a pariah. And that's probably, because you have suicide buffalo wings and suicide hot sauce, and you're running suicide sprints in school, which none of those correlate with the emotional pain of needing and feeling like you need or want to die. So I think we need to make changes around that, individually and collectively. And then or you're a pariah, right? So like 7 layers of hell, and that what is it, Dante's Inferno or whatever, worse than pedophiles and murderers, like the lowest layer of hell, which isn't real probably, but it still influences people's thought and how they show up in the world. And so worse than that, if you die by suicide, as if like that's a sinful thing, or you're bad or whatever. So now to me, it's about compassion and cultivating hope and being present. And it's totally this interdependent thing, right? We need each other on so many levels. So we need to figure out and find more and more ways to cultivate interdependence. And then on an individual, so that's on a macro level, and then on a micro level, on an individual level. And then for me, since I can really mostly just talk about me, I'm constantly looking for ways to cultivate hope. And so sometimes that blinks into my head. It's like, there's these babies that live in your world that you love, and that my siblings' children, and what that would do, and that added legacy and that trauma, whether they understand it now or in the future, it's still traumatic for them. But it's not necessarily about, it's like doing the food work and the acting work and the writing work and learning more about spirituality, and like looking out and looking back. I'm looking out a window. You don't know what I'm looking. I'm like looking out a window. And just being like, this in general is just a big fucking miracle. It's amazing. Like just being present, being here, being in this moment, is on this spinning planet at the right amount of distance around this ball of, nuclear fire, whatever. And that it all happened, and here we are. And we're doing this thing. Like, that's a crazy ass miracle. And I just want to soak it in for a minute. Yeah. So there's like so many ways. So right now, so always, it's like, how do I cultivate hope in this moment? And then how do I do differently and healthier and better?
I want to know how the Impossible project kind of came along, and you're almost 4 books in now, right? Or is there more? Oh, 5 books.
Couple in development that are probably going to take a while. Yeah. So 5 at the moment.
Wow, dude. Yeah. Damn. Yeah. We had Rob Lethan on episode 94 for Uncomfortably Numb. And then we had the incomparable Carl Wagon on for The Fire Inside on episode 114, man. Dude, it's incredible. How did that all come about?
It started because I was realizing that my story was working, and I started to become really interested in how other stories were working, and also or would work. And then after I would do these speaking gigs, and this was between, like, I started doing this work in end of 2011, and then by like end of 13, I was like, wait a minute, I'm realizing that a lot of people are sharing their story with me after the event. And it's like they're celebrating, but sometimes they're like, I became a dad or a mom. My friend is struggling. I went through this kind of abuse, and this is what happened. And they were visibly changed. And so was I, after sharing that experience and that story that they had to speak up about. And a lot of times it was the first time that they had shared it. And then sometimes they're like, oh, I want to do what you do. And I was like, well, and I started thinking about, I was like, I was blogging a lot at the time, once a week for a little over 3 years. And I was like, so I know that I have somewhat of a marketing background. I have somewhat of a producing background. And so I can start posting these as guest blogs and kind of seeing like what that means and what it does for them and for others. And there's a lot of positive response. And I was like, wait a minute, I had put out my book, The Gospel According to Josh, a couple of years prior. I put it out in 2013. I was like, well, I have all this like producing knowledge about books and stuff. And then I was really interested in self-development, and I was paying attention to Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I was like, it's a good series but I don't need to learn about your three-legged dog that came back to you 2 years later. I'm sure it's a heartwarming story, but it doesn't really mean shit to me. Even though it does, it's meaningful to somebody, so that has value. But I was like, I want to do something that's a little less surfacey, and I want to do stuff that's a little grittier and that ties into social justice and mental health and things like that. So I had this idea. So I started reaching out to the people that I knew and the people who I connected with, and then I started reaching out and so in the first book, which has the subtitle "Re-engaging with Life, Creating a New You," it has a butterfly on the front. We have an Oscar winner, a Tony Award winner. We just have some amazing people. And so there's subcategories in the first one, and it's like LGBT, second acts and second chances, mental health and mental illness, suicide, and a few others. And it's 1,000 words or less. So it's about 600 to 1,000 words of someone sharing their story, what they've been through, like something traumatic, and how they engage in life in the aftermath, and what they learned. So it could be 5% hopeful or it could be 100% hopeful. And I curated it, cultivated it, edited it, put them together, and that was a success. Came out in 2016. Then we did another 50 story volume in about 14 or 15 months later. That was focused all on elements of mental illness. And that was a Changing Minds edition, which I kind of launched, that coincided with the launch of the curriculum that we talked about earlier. And then there's 3 books that I call that are in the Lemonade Stand editions, and that's the one that has Rob and Carl in it. The third one in the Lemonade Stand, but there's 3 of them. They don't have a general purpose per se, but they're 20 stories instead of 50, because I found it's really hard to get 50 people. It's like herding cats. And so I had to, and the idea was like, okay, so maybe I'll put them all together at some point in their own volume. I haven't gotten to that yet. But these 20 stories, and so each of the 3 Lemonade Stands, they're just incredible. And the third one is probably the closest to a themed book, because it's a lot of PTSD, trauma, fire service, cop.
A lot of first responder stuff. Yeah,
yep. And so proud of that book too, because that was the first one. So to be honest with you, the second book, the second 50 story book, I say that I had a co-author. It's really my ex-partner who didn't do much, and that's okay, bless her heart. But this one, the Lemonade Stand 3 with Kathleen, my friend Kathleen, that Robin, she was a true partner on this, and she helped curate and bring in the stories and connected to the people, because I didn't have the energy to do that.
Big shout out to Kathleen, because we know Kathleen. Kathleen is a friend of the show. Yeah,
that's where we got the books from, was Kathleen.
Yeah. Kathleen sent them to us, and
super nice.
Yeah, she hooked us up with Carl too. Got Carl to get on, and which was awesome. And so big shout out to Kathleen. And actually, she's talked about coming on too. She wasn't sure about, but that invitation's always open to her anytime, man.
Yeah, she's a good friend. And we met through, I was at Bergen Community College in Jersey, and her daughter were there in 2013. And that's how we met. And my stuff resonated, and then she's been just a friend and now a partner since then. So yeah, just a little backstory on that. But Lemonade,
dude, that is awesome. And anybody who's listening that I reached out to in August from the Lemonade Stand that wants to come on, that invitation is still there. I had just got really busy and I haven't been able to work to put it together yet, but I'm coming back to you people, I promise. The whole thing about you finding purpose at a young age. And did you realize at that age that creatively that the arts did you feel it was a purpose, or was it that it filled your cup up so much that you didn't realize that it was a purpose? Or did you instantly know that was where you should be in one form or another?
I knew it was where I was supposed to be. It filled up my cup. And it was an escape, it was like, it was a place where I felt like I could connect. Like, I wasn't ready to connect to all parts of myself either, but I was like, I can be the most myself here. I get to sing and act and then be part of a community. And then I also didn't have to be around the toxicity that was, present at home. And and it was, yeah, but it without the words at the time, I think it was just like, I need to be here because it's fun. It makes me feel good, and it might be my way out. Yeah.
Did that add to the toxicity at your house? Your artistic create endeavors? Because I sense, and maybe I'm not sensing this correctly, but obviously there was a lot of problems between you and your dad. And your dad obviously took a lot of stuff out on you. Did he view the arts as unmanly or something? Or was it did that like play a part in things? Like, was that toxic masculinity shit? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think partly, yeah. I think partly he didn't want to give me rides to places because like he had an eye disease. He also was like, I don't think he wanted to have kids. So like, doing that kind of stuff, which is, not everybody wants to have kids. Like you want to get laid and you forget to, wrap it up. Like, all right, dude, I feel you. I haven't been there, but others have.
That's a good outlook on it.
So he had did he have like other medical conditions as well?
I think so. I think he had something else going on up to when, near when he passed away. Like I know, like, so I have some kind of memory of him alluding to or talking about some physical health stuff. So he had retinitis pigmentosa, which means he couldn't see beyond, he had no peripheral vision. And he couldn't see at night. And I didn't realize how profoundly that affected him physically and mentally. And because he minimized it in a lot of ways, and sometimes that I think that's when you go too far in any healthy thing, it becomes unhealthy. So I think it started in a healthy place for him, I'm guessing, and then became unhealthy because he just wanted to marginalize his experience with that. But yeah, so I think that he probably viewed me as unmanly, and probably because he did sing and he did stuff at church, but it was church and that was a different thing than the rest of it. So,
yeah, well, did that play a part did that play any part in it too? Was there an extreme religious view? Like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was wondering if that may have had some.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to ask that question, Will.
Yeah, well, my views on religion are tainted. So,
yeah. I'm coming back to it. I'm not a religious person, but I've had to do a lot of internal work and be like, okay, this is doing something for this person or these people. And it's a protective factor and a coping and a way to show up and feel good in the world. I don't need religion to do those things, but some people do. And I need to be okay with that because we all need each other, and whether or not those things and those stories and those myths are true, it's not going to change. And I don't have anything to replace it for those people either. Like I don't like, oh, and this is how it's going to rock their world too much, and probably vice versa, because I could be completely wrong. It was the Presbyterians all along. We should have listened to the Presbyterians. I don't know, like, so when we will find out, I guess, when we die, but or maybe not.
Well, do you think that may play a part in some people's problems too? That extreme view of leaving it all up to a higher power and not taking the work on themselves. Do you think that actually is like part of the God delusion that we have in a way? And I coined that term from Richard Dawkins because that was the book, The God Delusion. And I've come back to spirituality. I'm a recovering Catholic, as I will always say. I went to Catholic school. I did the whole Catholic thing. I sang in church choir. I love church, love singing in church. That was the whole reason I went to church, was to sing. But I also realize that a lot of this leaves people empty, and they leave them hoping and grasping onto something that when they really go to look for it isn't there because they haven't created it themselves. So I'm wondering if that has played a part into some people's delusion.
I think I just wanted to say this real quick. I think there's also a certain role of connection that it plays as well. Cause Josh, where you spoke when you were younger, you were more heavily involved in the church. And I think that could have had a positive effect on you. You know what I mean? In some ways, I think it
absolutely did. And it left me empty with a lot of other stuff though.
Sure.
Because there's nothing, because the problem that I see with it is that at the heart of it, the myths and the stories are good, but it's the underlying bullshit that comes with it. And the fact that especially in that form of it, it's all about sin, and it's all about us being born in original. It's just like there's too many layers of it to say, okay, well, I mean, you really want to walk around feeling like you're a sin, then that's up to you. But
I think it's
that
how it's presented, probably. Certain people present it as this is the golden rule, and this is the only rule that you must abide by, which goes for anything, you know what I mean? But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think like I said before, like anything healthy, when we indulge in it too much, it becomes unhealthy. And I think to me, religion, sex, chocolate, substances can all feed an addiction, right? Why am I here so much? Why am I doing this for myself? Am I avoiding dealing with something? So the delusion, right? And then when that's presented in such a way where faith and spirituality and religion is the only coping tool and mechanism and skill, well, we're whole people, we're physical beings, we're spiritual beings. And so to say to someone that this is the only tool that you have, well, it's not gonna do them any good, right? We need multi-tiered layers of support and multiple tools and a tool belt. Like you can't fix drywall.
Tool belt.
Yeah, you can't fix drywall. You're like, I really need to spackle this, but all I have is a I don't know, a spoon or a screwdriver. Like I can't spackle with a screwdriver, right? And so like, but you should be. You're spiritually deficient because you're not using the screwdriver right. Well, your fucking wall doesn't need the thing that my wall needs, motherfucker.
I love it. I love it, dude. You're part of the family, man. I love this. I relate. Dude, I've been saying that for years. Tool belts and tools. It's and what I've come to the conclusion of is it's never one thing that gets us stuck, so to speak, and it's never one thing that gets us unstuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For sure. So I can totally I stand behind that. What you're saying. It's just never one thing, and I think to that alone to put that burden or weight or whatever you want to call it on somebody, I feel like you're number one, you're taking a bit of their autonomy away. And number two, it's not feasible. It's not sustainable. It's not just one. There's never one thing, there was never meant to be only one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're not honoring their personhood or their dignity by saying that this is the only thing. I also think that the other, and this is a macro issue, and it's not anyone's bad or wrong, or wrong in a sense, but not as a judgment call, that when we and so yes, the community thing is great, and I love that, and that's the fellowship and all that stuff around various religious communities and stuff, Islam, Buddhism, whatever, that community piece is great. The problem with being a part of any group, religious or not, is when we only hang out with one kind of group, then we live in an echo chamber, and we're confirmation bias. And so we're not looking at all angles, and we're not having a full life. So we're not finding new coping mechanisms and tools. We're not self-examining from different angles. Even if we arrive back at the same conclusion, at least we have these different viewpoints to consider. So I think that's part of the issue too. And then we don't learn how to solve complex problems in healthy ways, complex problems such as mental health conditions and things like that. So
I was just going to say that you're right. I think we've lost that ability for critical thinking.
Yes. We have, because we're surrounded by tribes, man. You got everybody going, you got to find your tribe. You got to find your tribe. You find your community so you can expand your community. You don't find your tribe so you can just fucking wall it off and say, stay out because we don't like you. That's that. And because you can't solve anything that way. Nothing gets fixed. Nothing. You need community involvement for everything. And that's where I find personally that this community is one of the most open communities there are, because it's filled with so many different individuals in the mental health community. And mental health, we all have mental health. We don't all have mental illness. So let's get that right. Everyone has mental health. Not everyone has mental illness. Josh, it has been awesome having you here this morning, man.
And just thank you for what you do. And thank you for today, man.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Tim, Will, you guys are doing good work. God's work. use that. Little G, big G, wherever
Little G for me, man. Little G, big O, little D. That's how I spell it. That's how I spell it, because that O is where it's at, man. It's that continuing, that's what it's all about. So
my head, we're all tentacles of that thing, so we're all a piece of it, but I could be wrong. Like I said,
I think you're right. I think you're right, man. No, I think you're right. I think we are all a piece. We're all a piece of the same thing. It's just that some of us have twisted views of what that thing is.
Get it together, people. Let's build bridges. That's my life work. I think it's like, let's build bridges. Let's call people in instead of calling them out. Find connection. Yeah, man. Thanks for what you guys do. This is good stuff. Good work. Yeah.
Build bridges. I like it.
Yeah, build bridges.
So Joshua, if you do you have a favorite or a least favorite word?
So the word MISLED, I don't know if it's my favorite or least favorite, but it's a funny word to me, because every time I read it, I'm like, what the hell does mizzled mean? Just glad people.
Yeah. Nice.
That's one of them.
That was pretty funny. You got another one?
I think the word Philharmonic is another good one.
Nice.
It's got a nice ring to it. It's got a nice ring to it. It's got a nice ring to it.
Like, does he prefer to be called Philip? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know this guy.
Nice. He's trying out new material for you people right here.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo. We're going into the comedy show now.
Yeah,
dude, I find that stand-up comedy is one of the purest forms of art there is. And especially if, like, you can basically tell when a comedian is being real and not being real. And I tend to find that most of them have to be real, because that's the only way that they make a living. If they're not, then they don't succeed. So I find, do you find, I didn't mean to get off track, because sometimes these things happen. So, and I'll forego my second question and I'll ask you this: where does stand-up comedy stand in relation to, say, putting a one-man show together? As far as, is there a different feeling that you get from either, or do you get different insights from doing comedy that you don't from putting together shows or music?
They're kissing cousins for sure. Like, I mean, which is awkward. It
depends on how hot your cousin is.
Yeah, they're gonna be okay to have babies. But different grandmas. But they're similar. So there's some similar, and it depends on the kind of comedian that you are, and the kind of, because you can be, there's the storytelling comedian, there's sort of the boom, 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 boom comedian, there's the absurd comedian. I think I'm sort of in the middle of, like, humor, being a humorist, a storyteller, and some dry humor, right? And that's a little bit of how I do the one-man show stuff. So they kind of crisscross in some ways. And when I did the one-man show more frequently, I remembered that there are elements of stand-up in that too. To me, stand-up is a little bit harder because you're supposed to be funny, like you kind of have to be. But what I realized too is that audiences want you to succeed. So just be with them. And what you can do when things aren't going well, maybe in a comedy set versus like a scripted, music night or a music set or one-man show, is you can actually kind of call yourself out on it and work with the audience to kind of come back to a place of, like, we're all aware that I'm sucking right now. I remember this Johnny Carson thing real quick. I saw him on VHS when I was a kid. It was like his best of, you buy it on Time Life or something like that. And it was like, he was totally bombing his monologue opening a show. And then he pulls the boom mic down from above and he's like, he starts tapping and he's like, clean up on aisle 3, clean up on aisle 3. And everyone knew, like, that was him kind of calling himself, like, I totally sucked right now. But everyone kind of came back and was on board, like, oh, we all had this moment together. So that's something that has stuck with me for a long time.
Wow, and you just inspired a new question, because usually at this pod I ask about animals, and stuff. And because I love animals, we love our animals. But actually, it kind of leads me to a new question. What is one of the most embarrassing moments you've had performing?
Oh, that's a good one. Oh my God. As of recent, I was just testing out new material in Philly, like I was doing, and I was with a new friend. I was really nervous, and she really likes to smoke weed, and I do at night to, but I can't do it to be creative. But I was really nervous, and we were hanging, and so I smoked a little before the set. It was like a Sunday afternoon, and it was like, what am I doing? And I got up, and I don't even think I knew what the hell I was doing. Nobody else knew what I was doing. I was like, all right, you learned a lesson. Don't be smoking that sticky icky when you got to do stuff important. So that was kind of embarrassing. The only other that it was slightly, I was like, I'm thinking of when I was in high school. I hotboxed a friend in Hello Dolly. I tooted under a set, and he was not happy. And I was like,
Oh no.
And then we went on, and we had to pretend like we're friends, or we're about to do a dance number. Like,
That's all right. I do that to Tim. I do that to Tim every time we record.
he's like, well, hello, darling.
That sounds like what's his name? Louis Armstrong with like COPD or something.
That's exactly what I was going for. So I'm glad you got that.
You're working through that impersonation.
Thank you. The last question, if there was something that you could do or you would like to see done for mental health as a whole without any kind of restraint, what would it be?
Oh man, because there's so many combos, right? Like I'm trying to think of how I can sort of like 1,000 wishes. When you're like, I'm gonna, I think that integrating mental health and social emotional learning and trauma informed into all elements of education and into systems, into prison, so integrating all of that into everything that we do, because I think it'll just make for a more compassionate and interconnected existence for everybody. I was having this conversation recently. I was like, man, it's really hard to do self-development work. It's painful. It's hard. And I was like, man, what would life be like if because I was kind of bitching and moaning to a friend, and it was a brief thing. And I was like, wait a minute, I know exactly what it'd be like. It would be painful and harder and more difficult, and I might not be here. Right. So I think, when we do the work, y'all, it's usually really harder at the beginning than the maintenance afterwards. So be prepared to take a little bit of a dip, maybe, as you start to choose to do the work for self. But know that it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Take the time, give yourself time, and be gentle with yourself as you're getting going, because you don't know what you don't know.
Wow. That's the gospel of Joshua.
Until next week, be well.
Be safe.
Be
Bye.